I'm Dr. Neil Barnard. Thank you for joining me and my team with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to ask, what can be done for diabetes? Is it possible to turn this disease around and to keep adults and children from getting it in the first place? Well, diabetes has taken a horrible toll across this country, especially on American Indians and Alaska Natives. 30% of Native Americans have a condition called prediabetes. And if nothing changes, they're likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Well, first, some preliminaries. What is diabetes? Normally, when we eat, foods are digested and they release a form of sugar called glucose, which moves into our bloodstream and eventually into the cells of the body to give them energy. But in people with diabetes, glucose has trouble getting into the muscle cells in particular. You've probably heard that diabetes is related to a hormone called insulin. Well, insulin is made in the pancreas, which is an organ in your abdomen. And insulin is like a key that opens the doors of our muscle cells to let glucose in. Now, some people have type 1 diabetes. And in these people, the pancreas is no longer making insulin. And insulin injections are the life-saving treatment that they need. But most people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Their pancreases are still making insulin, and for them the problem is insulin resistance. That is, their muscle cells don't respond normally to insulin. They've got plenty of the insulin keys, but the locks are not opening up. And there's a third kind called gestational diabetes. It occurs during pregnancy. It goes away when the baby is born, but it's a sign that type 2 diabetes could be right around the corner. In this program, you'll learn about a natural and healthful way of eating that could help you to reduce or even eliminate your need for medication if you have type 2 diabetes, and it will lower your risk of complications from any kind of diabetes. To track our progress, there's a blood test that measures the level of diabetes control, and I've asked diabetes nurse practitioner Carolyn Trapp to give you her take on this important test.
The A1C level is a blood test that's used to diagnose diabetes and to track your progress. The higher your A1C level is, the more at risk of complications you're at from uncontrolled diabetes. So it's a really important test to know about. And you want to ask your healthcare provider, what's the target A1C level for you? Is it 6.5%? Is it 7 or 7.5%? Find out what your target is. Now, just because you've been told you have a high A1C level now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get complications from diabetes, because this test can change over time. If you make some significant changes in what you're eating, you can have a lower A1C level. And that's what this program is all about. Dr. Barnard is going to talk about what is the best way to eat to lower your A1C level and prevent those complications of diabetes.
Let's consider, why do some people get diabetes and others don't? Well, the Native Americans who've been studied the most in relation to diabetes are the Pima of the southwestern US and northern Mexico. And in the 19th century, Americans diverted the water supply the Pima had used for irrigating crops, and it caused a massive disruption in their ability to grow traditional foods. And then 20th century US government programs started supplying non-traditional foods, canned meats, cheese, milk, and egg mix, along with some canned vegetables and fruits and dry cereals. But breakfasts of eggs and bacon and sausage became common, and hamburgers and pork chops and cheese are now everyday fare. But south of the border, things are different. The Mexican Pima live in the Sierra Madre Mountains, and they've been pretty much untouched by the changes in food availability that occurred among their American relatives. The Mexican Pima work on farms, they plant and harvest crops, they get regular exercise, and they have an abundance of healthful, traditional foods, beans, corn and wheat tortillas, potatoes, seasonal produce like zucchini and tomatoes, garlic and peppers, melons and peaches and apples. And in 2006, a team of researchers compared the health of these two groups, and the results were dramatic. An average Pima man north of the border was 60 pounds heavier than men south of the border. While diabetes was pretty rare in Mexico, it was a huge problem north of the border. For those over 55 years of age, 3 out of every 4 had diabetes. So, while genetic factors do contribute to diabetes risk, it's really clear that this north of the border diet, high in animal protein and fat and low in fiber, has fueled this epidemic of diabetes. Another group in Mexico, called the Tarahumara, are well known for their athletic prowess, running for vast distances. And their traditional foods are pretty similar to those of the Mexican Pima. In 1991, an American research team convinced 13 Tarahumara men and women to try a westernized diet as part of a research study. And the results came quickly. Over 5 weeks, the average study participant gained 8 pounds, and their cholesterol levels rose by 30%. Now, here's what I make of this. The foods that promote good health are corn, beans, all the traditional plant-derived staples that are native to the region. So why are these plant-based foods so powerful? Well, first of all, they help keep people trim, but there's another reason too. You remember how in type 2 diabetes, glucose can't get into the muscle cells properly? The sugar in the blood, glucose, it has trouble getting inside the cells because the keys are not working. That's insulin. If the insulin keys can't open up the muscle cells, glucose can't get inside. Well, what is stopping the insulin key from being able to open the muscle cell? What's gumming up the works? Well, it looks like the problem is fat. Fat building up inside the cell. Look at this drawing of a muscle cell. Under normal conditions, you wouldn't see very much fat in the cell, but this cell is full of yellow blobs of fat, and that comes from the fatty foods that we eat. It could come from a hamburger, from chicken, from fish, from canned meats, or from cheese, or even from vegetable oil, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Any fatty foods, they all end up clogging the muscle cells, and that makes insulin ineffective. And if insulin can't do its job, then the muscle cells don't get the glucose that they need for energy, and then the sugar that can't get into the cells builds up in the blood, and that is diabetes. But here's the good news. Studies have shown that when people switch to a diet that's very low in fat, that emphasizes the traditional plant-based foods, these blobs of fat start to melt away. And without all that fat in the way, insulin can do its job. And the blood sugar levels can fall and even return to normal. Now, fortunately, a plant-based diet makes it easy to avoid all that excess fat. Plant foods do have a little bit of fat, but just the amount that our bodies actually need for health. Not enough to clog up our muscle cells and keep the insulin from doing its job. So, with the support of the National Institutes of Health, my research team decided to try a dramatically different approach. If fatty foods are clogging up the muscle cells, we aimed to see what would happen if we used a diet that had very little fat in it. We brought in 99 people, all of whom had diabetes. And let me describe their experience. A man named Vance came into our research study. Vance's father was dead by age 30. Vance was 31 when he was diagnosed with diabetes. He was in his late 30s when he came in to see us. And what we asked him to do was to set aside animal products, because if there's no animal fat on your plate, then no animal fat is going to sneak into your cells. We also asked him to keep the oils very low, so that meant no more taking that bottle of oil and going glug, 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 glug into the pan when you're cooking. But those were the only rules. Set the animal products aside, keep the oils really low. We didn't worry about calories. We did not count carbohydrates. We did not limit portions. And Vance and all the other participants were free to eat all the bean burritos and corn tortillas and veggie lasagna, blueberry pancakes, split pea soup, anything else that they wanted that fit the rules. Over the next year, Vance lost weight and lost weight and lost weight, eventually losing about 60 pounds. His blood sugar came back down to the normal range. He got off his medications, and all traces of diabetes had disappeared. And when I asked for his permission to tell his story, he said, "Make sure you tell everybody that my erectile dysfunction got better too." Write that down. People's blood sugars dropped, their weight came down, and their cholesterol levels fell. And then we asked our participants how they felt about this diet change. I mean, after all, They weren't eating beef or chicken or cheese pizza or any of those things, but many said this was the easiest diet they had ever been on because we didn't make them count calories or starve, and most importantly, they were regaining their health. Maybe you'd like to try out this way of eating. Let me introduce you to the Power Plate. You want to build your meals from these 4 healthy food groups. The first is vegetables. Start with green leafy vegetables, kale, collard greens, chard, spinach, and all types of lettuce. Other great vegetables are broccoli, cucumbers, onions, cauliflower, carrots, and of course, all types of squash. The list goes on and on. Enjoy your vegetables fresh, roasted, or steamed, just not fried in oil. And seek out a rainbow of vegetables, all different colors. The colors represent different nutrients that are good for us. The next group is grains. They are hearty, they're filling, and there are so many to choose from. Corn is a healthful grain that turns into so many great meals. Rice, oats, barley, amaranth, quinoa, millet, and there are many more too that are indigenous to different areas. And you might cook a little more than you need because cooked grains can be frozen and reheated later for a quick meal. Whole grain breads and whole grain pastas are also part of the grain group. Now the third group of the Power Plate is the legume group, which includes beans, peas, and lentils, anything that grows in a pod. So that means pinto beans, black beans, garbanzo beans, kidney beans, navy beans, lima beans, the works. They're low in fat, they're high in protein, they're rich in calcium and iron. Beans are great in stews and soups, and you can even make them into burgers. They can replace the meat that's used in a lot of recipes. And what's the world's easiest convenience food? It has to be a can of baked beans. But make it vegetarian, of course. The last group on the Power Plate is the fruit group. Now, you might have heard that people with diabetes shouldn't eat fruit, but think about it. Fruits are really full of vitamins and healthy fiber, so you don't want to miss them. And when you're eating a healthful diet, you'll find that fruits are really pretty gentle on your blood sugar. You'll also notice what's not on the Power Plate. Keep in mind, our goal is to turn diabetes around, and we really want to succeed, so we'll leave off the animal products, the meat, the dairy products, and the eggs, and that's going to eliminate all of the animal fat. We'll also minimize the vegetable oils, and that gives our cells the best chance of cleaning out the fat so that insulin can start working again. So now you know about building meals from the Power Plate. Very easy. Maybe you have some questions about nutrition, and you're wondering, can I really get everything my body needs from plant-based foods? Well, here to answer that question is registered dietitian Susan Levin.
Hi, I'm Susan. Maybe you want some reassurance that plant-based diets are best for you and your family. Well, you should know that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the world's largest organization of nutrition professionals, published a position statement that said plant-based diets are safe and beneficial for all ages. And they can help to prevent and treat many chronic diseases like diabetes. But you know, I didn't learn much about plant-based diets at my university, and maybe your healthcare provider also was not taught about this when he or she went to school and has never recommended it to you. Fortunately, though, more and more healthcare professionals are now learning about this approach. Not to get too technical, but here are a couple of key points about plant-based nutrition. First, what about protein? Do humans need to eat animals to make muscles strong? The answer is no. Beans, greens, and grains are excellent sources of protein, and they don't come packaged full of saturated fat and cholesterol. If you get enough calories, you are most likely getting enough protein. In fact, some pretty exceptional athletes eat plant, not animal, sources of protein. They know it's the healthiest way to go, and as a runner, I couldn't agree more. Take ultramarathoner Scott Jurek. He has run and won the Western States 100-mile endurance run 7 times in a row. And you know, some professional football players, hockey players, and basketball players also get all their protein from plants. Want more evidence? Consider the animal kingdom. Many large, strong animals such as horses, oxen, gorillas get their protein from plants. How about iron? Iron is needed to keep red blood cells healthy. Iron can be found in green leafy vegetables, grains, and beans. people who do not get enough iron in their diet might develop anemia. Vegans and vegetarians actually consume more iron than meat eaters, and studies have shown that vegans and vegetarians have no more anemia than people who eat meat. Plant-based sources of iron are more healthful and easily accessible. This is true for infants as well, although starting with an iron-fortified solid food may be recommended. Calcium is another nutrient that we have learned about through commercials on TV. Calcium is important for strong bones, but the ads tell us that we need to drink cow's milk to get our calcium. Do humans need milk? Only if you are an infant, and cow's milk is best left for the calves. Most green leafy vegetables, such as kale, collards, broccoli, beet greens, and others, are great sources of calcium. And the calcium in these plants is twice as absorbable as the calcium found in cow's milk. Want something to put on your cereal instead of dairy? Try soy milk, almond milk, any non-dairy milk. Most grocery stores carry these. Or make your own. You can find recipes online for non-dairy milks. You might wonder, how does non-dairy milk taste? Non-dairy milk may not taste like cow's milk to you, but each variety is delicious in its own way. And after a few days of almond milk or rice milk on your cereal or in your coffee, cow's milk will be a thing of the past. What about vitamin B12? Okay, here's one place that a supplement is a good idea. B12 deficiency can lead to nerve damage or it can cause anemia. The government recommends, and we agree, that anyone over the age of 50 take vitamin B12, because as we get older, we don't absorb B12 as well as we did when we were younger. In addition, if you follow a plant-based diet at any age, be sure to take a B12 supplement. Some foods are fortified with B12, such as some breakfast cereals, but your safest bet is to take a B12 tablet. So, if you are wondering, can I get healthy and strong on a plant-based diet? Think of the big, strong animals that live on foods that grow in the ground. And remember the athletes that get their fuel from plants with winning results. Finally, know that plant foods plus a vitamin B12 tablet provide the essential nutrients we need for optimal health.
Thanks, Susan, for making it clear that a plant-based way of eating is just what the doctor ordered. So, how do you get started? Well, first, let's think about some meal ideas. What we want to do is to find a couple of breakfasts, a couple of lunches, and some dinners that you like. So let's start with breakfast. How about a big bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins? Or maybe blueberry pancakes or veggie sausage, not meat sausage. And give these foods a try and just see which ones you like. For lunch, how about a bean burrito or a bowl of veggie chili? For dinner, vegetable stew, spaghetti with wild mushrooms, or beans or rice, whatever else calls to you. Again, we're going to leave out the animal products. We're going to keep the oils to a minimum, so take a week or two and just see what really works for you. Next, when you're feeling ready, jump in and take a 3-week test drive. During this time, you'll want to eat the foods that you already know that you like, and they're free of animal products, but give it 100%. 3 weeks is long enough to see results, but it's also short enough that it's manageable. And chances are you'll feel better and you're going to want to keep going for more than 3 weeks. But don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. One word of caution before you get started. If you take medications for diabetes or high blood pressure, work with your healthcare provider. For some people who shift to a plant-based diet, medications become too strong. Even if you have never had low blood sugar or low blood pressure, this can really happen. So be in touch with your healthcare provider before you start your diet change. Your provider might decide to reduce your medicines as you go along. Now, a few foods are a little bit challenging for people to get away from. And it doesn't mean that you have a lack of willpower. It just means that this is the way these foods are. In our research studies, some people have trouble getting away from cheese. Yes, it's loaded with fat and loaded with cholesterol, but some people have trouble setting it aside. The reason apparently is that cheese contains some opiate chemicals that make it almost a little addicting. Other foods that people tend to get hooked on include meat, sugar, and chocolate. You know what I mean. But if you get them out of your diet for about 3 weeks, you'll discover that your cravings start to fade away. So let's wrap up. Here are the key points that I'd like you to remember. Type 2 diabetes really can be turned around with a plant-based diet using the power plate as our guide. Now, results vary, but many people lose weight, they have better blood sugar levels, they need less medications, they have more energy. Focus on eating less fat, and you can do this by setting the animal products aside, keeping the oils low, and think about giving it an all-out try for 3 weeks in a row. See for yourself how this works for you. Food really can be medicine, but fortunately, as you'll see, it doesn't taste like medicine.